Hello, my name's Aviva, and today I have a bunch of It's Always Been You trope romance recommendations. So the It's Always Been You trope is somewhat of a spoiler because it's not something that the book starts out as. It's something that you find out throughout reading the book. Sometimes a book could maybe start out as a friends to lovers, and then you find out that one of the friends was really pining after the other his entire life or her entire life. And it's more of like it's always been you. I've never been able to love somebody as much as I love you, and I could only tell you now for whatever reason. Or sometimes it's like an enemies to lovers where it's like, for whatever reason, they thought that they were enemies, but really one of them had feelings for each other the whole time. So this entire video is somewhat of a really big spoiler, but at the same time, I'm a huge fan of this trope. And if somebody told me that a book had a It's Always Been You trope, I would definitely want to read it. So I'm giving the warning out now that every book that I talk about in this video is somewhat going to be spoiled by finding out that it has this trope in it. But I'm not actually going to tell you how this trope fits into the book. I'm just going to tell you what the book is about, and you're just going to have to know that it does have somewhere in there the It's Only Been You trope. And I'm going to leave that as a, you'll find out for yourself, but just take my word for it that that trope is in this book. So anyway, if you're down to get spoiled and you want to hear all the books that I have to share with you, then let's get started. First up, I have Enemies by Tejan. So this is actually a recent read of mine, and I absolutely love this book. This is an enemies to lovers football romance. It's basically about this girl who is in college for like marine biology in the state of Texas, but she didn't grow up there. She's like out of state in college. And basically she grew up with this boy and she was best friends with him until they like hit puberty-ish time. And now they absolutely hate each other's guts. And he is now a pro football player in the state of Texas as well. So now that they're both in the same state away from home, their parents are like, here are each other's phone numbers. You guys should connect because, you don't know anybody else. And they really don't want to talk to each other. They absolutely hate each other. And then something really devastating happens in this girl's life. And this guy has to go and give her the news about it. And then he's going to start to like basically take care of her because, she's not in a good space right now to be alone for whatever reason. That is kind of spoilery, so I can't say. But basically, he's going to take care of her, and they also kind of hate each other. And the story is going to go from there. So it's an enemies to lovers sports romance. Seriously, you couldn't ask for anything more. Next up, I have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. So this is a fake dating trope book, but it also does have the It's Always Been You trope. So in this book, you basically have this girl who used to date this guy and she really doesn't care about him anymore. And now her best friend kind of has a crush on him, and her best friend doesn't want to date this guy because, the girl code or whatever. So this girl is like, seriously, just date him. I don't care about him. And the girlfriend doesn't believe her. So she basically goes up to the first guy she sees and kisses him on the lips because she wants her friend to know that she's over this guy. And then happens to be the guy that she kisses is like a professor in the same college, and she's like a PhD student. And then circumstances happen and they basically start to fake date each other because she wants her friend to start dating her ex, and he has his own reasons for wanting to fake date her. And the story is kind of going to go from there. So this is a really hyped up book and I very much enjoyed it, but I will say that it wasn't like my favorite from this stack, but I also do understand the hype that it gets. So I know that a lot of people are curious about this book because it's like, I'm seeing it everywhere and everybody's raving its like top off or whatever. And that was such like a not the right thing to say, like raving its top off, huh? It's like people are raving about it, And I will say that I get the hype because it has that whole like science thing going on and people are really into fake dating. But what didn't make this book top tier for me is that I wish that there was more romance going on. It was a little bit heavy on the science. Even though the science was very interesting to me, I still wish that it was a little bit heavier on the romance. So that's my complaint for this book. But if you are a big fan of contemporary books, like you like seeing the surroundings of people and the stuff that are going on in their lives besides for the actual romance, then you'll probably love this book. Next up, I have The Spanish Love Deception, which besides for having an It's Always Been You trope in it, it is also an enemies to lovers fake dating book. So it's basically about this girl who has to go home to her sister's wedding in Spain. She lives in the US, and basically she kind of told her family that she's bringing home a date / a boyfriend to her sister's wedding. The problem is she doesn't actually have one. So she's complaining to her best friend. They work together, so she's in, her office complaining to her friend. And one of the people that she works with overhears her and is like, you can take me as your fake date. And happens to be the guy that offered this. They don't really get along. They're kind of like rivals in the workplace, kind of enemies sort of thing. And she's like, what the hell? You hate me. Like, why would you want to do that for me? And he's like, well, do you have any other choice? Do you have any other options? And she's like, no, but I don't like you and I don't want you to pretend to be my boyfriend at my family's wedding. And basically the first half of the book is kind of like him convincing her to like take him at this fake wedding. And then the second half of them is fake dating at the wedding. And there's a lot more that's going on, but basically there's a lot going on in this book in a really good way of like, you have this whole workplace environment, enemies to lovers thing, but then you also have this fake dating, vacation, wedding scenario. So I love every single thing I just said. And the fact that all of that is mushed into one book makes this one of like my favorite reads of the year. Next, I have The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. So I love this book. When I originally picked this up, I literally read it in like almost one sitting. I mean, I couldn't read it in one sitting because it was a little too large, but for the most part, I literally flew through this book. I couldn't put it down from the second I picked it up. And it's basically an enemies to lovers workplace environment book. These two people are working together. They're both like secretaries for like the owners of the company. And because of that, they kind of are facing each other in the office, like their desks face each other. And because they're staring at each other every single day, they've kind of come up with this like hating game sort of thing. And like they always mess with each other while they're working. And then they happen to both get offered this position to become each other's boss. So whoever wins this little competition is going to end up being the boss of the other person. But because they absolutely hate each other, they can't stand this. So then their rivalry kind of like, goes up a level because they have to beat the other person. And then, the story's gonna kind of go from there and they're gonna turn from enemies to lovers. So I love this book. I know that it's a very popular book, but it does have that It's Always Been You trope in it. So I recommend reading it. Next up, I have the first two books in the Sinner of Saints series by L.J. Shen. So this is actually a 4-book collection. They're all companion books. So you could technically read like just one of them and get like a full story in itself. But I recommend reading all 4 of them and in order because I absolutely love the entire series, but happens to be only the first 2 books fits into the It's Always Been You trope. So in this series, you're kind of following a bunch of rich guys that all work together. They've been best friends since high school and each of them get like their own romance story. And in book 1, you're following a dual timeline when they were in their senior year of high school and this girl moves on to this guy's estate because her parents are going to start working for his house because he like has this mansion and they need like housekeepers and stuff. So she's living on his estate and he kind of like hates her right from the beginning and starts bullying the hell out of her like so badly that he actually like runs her out of the state of California when they're at the end of their senior year of high school. And then you get to follow 10 years later as they bump into each other again, like in New York City when he's visiting on a business trip for whatever reason. And basically he's going to offer her a job and she can't really say no because she needs the money and he needs something from her. And then their like romance is just gonna like go from there. So I don't want to say any more only because, spoilers and stuff, but basically this book is absolutely amazing. I read it like a couple of months ago and I still think about it all the time and I cannot wait to do a reread of it. So it's amazing. The entire series is amazing and I highly recommend it if you're into like steamier romances, but like not too crazy, just, a little steamier. And then anyway, we have the second book, which is about the best friend of the boy, like in book 1, like this guy has a best friend and this is his book. And then also the girl in this book has a sister and then she is the girl in this book. So in this book, you're kind of following their story as they're kind of in close quarters. They're now living in the same building for whatever reason. And whatever, there's a whole thing about it. I don't even know what I could say because like, is it spoilery or not? But basically they're very attracted to each other and they've liked each other for a really long time and they're basically gonna get their own romance. So it definitely has that It's Always Been You trope in it, but I'm really nervous of giving away spoilers because I'm having a hard time reading the back of the book while I am trying to talk. So whatever. Anyway, I recommend both of these. So next up, I happen to have 2 books that so much fit this trope, except I personally did not like these books. The thing is they're so popular and I see them all over the place that I felt like it was a little bit wrong to not add them into this video in case you wanted to check them out, even though I didn't like them. I know that I don't have like the only taste in the world and some people like books that I don't like and I like some books that other people don't like. So I'm adding them in here in case you very much want to check out as many books as you can. But like, I'm not fully recommending them, only because if you end up reading them and you don't like them, like, it's not on me because I didn't like them either. But they do have this trope in it. I did read them and I know a lot of people like them, so you might like it too. Anyway, those two books are the Love and Other Words and People We Meet on Vacation. So Emily Henry, Christina Lauren. So both extremely popular. They are both friends to lovers, or really more of like friends to strangers to lovers. Both of them have that trope in it. And in People We Meet on Vacation, we kind of have these two people that they met in college, they became best friends, and they used to go on vacation together all the time. And then something happened and they no longer talk, and now it's like a couple years later and they both are really missing each other because, you know, they used to be best friends, and they decide to go on one more vacation together to see if they can fix their friendship. And this happens to be a dual timeline, so you're following both times, the past and the present, and you're trying to see like what happened in the past that made them not talk for a couple of years, and then you're seeing them obviously present day as they're trying to fix their relationship. So this definitely has that It's Always Been You trope, and for multiple reasons I wasn't a huge fan of this, but I mentioned it in this video anyway because I felt like, you know what, it doesn't really matter that much. And then we also have Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren, which is also a friends to strangers to lovers. It's basically that they were best friends almost their whole life. They seriously were like, you know, unbreakable. Like they were always together, and they had an amazing friendship growing up of being best friends. And they happened to have, you know, started to be romantic with each other as they were like turning from like children into teenagers. And then something happened and they both basically don't talk for like 11 years or so, and then they bump into each other like in their home state or whatever it was. They bump into each other somewhere, and then basically he's kind of like, please give me some time, I really want to talk to you, like I haven't been able to get a hold of you for like the past 11 years, like you just fell off the face of the planet. And she's like, okay, fine, let's talk. And then their whole like thing kind of goes from there. So this is a dual timeline also. Both of these books are like super similar to each other, and basically you get to see their past as they were friends, and then they slowly turn into lovers, and then something happens and they don't talk again. And the whole time you're trying to be like, well, what's going to happen in the past that made them not talk the whole time? And then you're seeing the present day as they are rekindling their friendship / their romance. So it was good. My problem with this book specifically, you know what? Actually, my problem with both of these books is the thing that happened in the past that made them not talk. I mean, I had a couple more issues with both of them, but one of my biggest problems with both of these books is I didn't like the whole like catalyst for the story of like what made them not talk for 11 years. Like I wasn't a fan of both of them for specific reasons. So whatever. But anyway, these are two more recommendations. Next up, I have Not So Nice Guy and Anything You Can Do, both by R.S. Gray. So I'm kind of talking about these at the same time because even though they have like two completely different stories, they're kind of very similar in their own way. First of all, they're both a little bit tiny. They are both rom-coms where they'll just like put a smile on your face. And basically, Not So Nice Guy is a friends to lovers. It's basically about these two people that work together. They're both like teachers in this school, and they've been really good friends for a long time. And they've both always been like dating other people, even though they've kind of both had crushes on each other the entire time. It's just never been the right time, and they've never told each other because for some reason they both had this idea that the other person wasn't interested. So it's like this whole like miscommunication mix up, and basically for whatever reason they're both going to be like available at the same time, and they're going to turn from friends to lovers, and it's a really cute story. And then we have Anything You Can Do, which is an enemies to lovers in like the workplace environment. It's basically about these two people who have literally been enemies their entire life. They were like literally born on like the same day or something like that, and they've always been like enemies and rivals and whatever it is. And anyway, now they are adults and they're both moving back to their hometown, and they are both going to be working for the same doctor's office because they both became doctors and they live in this tiny little town and whatever. Anyway, they're not going to be working together and they're going to be enemies, and it's obviously going to turn romantic. So enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, both adorable stories that have the It's Always Been You trope in it. They are both really small, really short, but not too short. They are going to both put a smile on your face, and I absolutely loved both of them. Next up, I have Say You Still Love Me by K.A. Tucker. So this is another dual timeline book. You're following these two people as they meet in summer camp when they're children, and they basically fall in love, and at the end of summer camp, something happens, and they don't talk like since they leave summer camp, and the girl never really knows why. The guy never called her, and like she can't really get a hold of him or anything like that. And now they're basically both adults, and she's working for her father. Her father is like very wealthy and owns a bunch of stuff, and they're basically like in her building that like her family owns, and she goes downstairs where she's working, and she finds out that they got a new security guard. And who do you know is this new security guard? The guy that she fell in love with in summer camp and hasn't seen in a couple of years. And she basically is like, oh my God, do you remember me? Like, why haven't I heard from you? And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't even know who you are. And she's like, what the hell? How the hell can you forget me? And then basically the story is going to start out where she tries to remind him who she is and like make him like, you know, admit that he remembers who she is because she knows that he's lying. And then, you know, the story is going to go from there. So it's a very good book. It's a little bit more of like hard hitting because there's something like, there's some stuff that happens in this book that is just a little bit more like, oh my God, like that was shocking, you know? And I mean, I don't remember if I cried in this book. Was it that sad? I don't remember. But there were some things. It's not like extremely lighthearted, but it's also not like too intense. I don't know. My intense and lighthearted levels are a little bit screwed up, but basically I very much love this book, and it definitely has that It's Always Been You trope in it. So I only have 3 more books to share with you, and they're all going to be YA recommendations. All the books that I talked about at the beginning were all adult books, so you know, the rest are YA. But anyway, the next book that I have to share with you is The Summer I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. So this is actually the first book in a trilogy. It's not a companion series. You have to read all 3 books as like one story, but I love this series. This is one of the first books that I read when I got back into reading, and I still absolutely love it. It has like a really special place in my heart, and I still think about this book like, you know, years after I've read it. Well, I only read it maybe like, what, 2 years ago? But basically, I love this series. It's basically about this girl who every summer she goes to this beach house that her like family friend owns, and they happen to have these 2 sons, and she's like best friends with them. And she looks forward every year to going to this place because it's basically like going home and like, you know, her family and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, the book kind of starts out where she's now old enough that these 2 guys are finally looking at her as an actual girl and not like a baby. And it's like, oh, this summer I turned pretty. And basically she's always had a crush on one of these boys, and it's like, it's a whole story. It's really cute. I very much liked it, and it has that It's Always Been You trope in it. I mean, she's had a crush on this boy that she, you know, she visits every summer her entire life, and he's always looked at her as like a little kid, and then, you know, things obviously change the summer that she turned pretty. Next up, I have The Last Thing You Said by Sarah Byron. So this is basically about a girl named Lucy who had a best friend named Trixie who had a brother named Ben, and all 3 of them were really close. They were always hanging out with each other. They live in this like small lake town, and basically Lucy and Ben were almost about to get together. They really liked each other for a while, and then Trixie unfortunately has an accident and dies, and now Lucy and Ben, they kind of like can't hang out together anymore. Something happens, and they basically start avoiding each other, and now it's a year later, and they still haven't really talked since Trixie's funeral, and they're both trying to just get over their grief. Lucy lost her best friend, Ben lost his sister, and they're still not really over it. And Ben is trying to date like a bunch of people to like forget about Lucy, and Lucy like really hates seeing it, so she's trying to avoid him because, you know, she's jealous, and she's trying to move on. And they're now both keep on running into each other because their summer jobs have started, so they're like in front of each other's faces the whole time. And basically you kind of just get to see their story as they keep trying to avoid each other but can't really because it's a really small town, and their romance is eventually going to happen. So I loved this book so much. It's a little bit more hard hitting because of all the grief that's going on, and they're both trying to move on, and they have a lot of problems in their life, obviously, because, you know, they lost a loved one. But at the same time, there's this really adorable, really angsty, tension-filled love story that's going on that I just absolutely loved. And it does also have that It's Always Been You trope in it. So like overall, I freaking love this book, and I highly recommend it. And the last book that I wanted to share with you is Run Away With Me by Mila Grace. So this happens to be the 3rd book in a companion series, the Come Back to Me companion series, which for the most part is like military-based romances. In all of the books in the series, you're kind of following this guy that is in the military or was in the military or something has to do with the military, and then this girl that is just like, you know, whatever. And then there's a romance going on. But what's really funny is that this book, I don't understand how it connects, even though it is the third book in the series, because besides for the fact that it's not a military romance whatsoever, it's actually a hockey sports romance, it also does not connect character-wise to any of the other books that I could think of, because I read all 5 books and I did see how all of them somewhat connected. It's all very minimally, like you seriously can pick up any single one of these books and like, you know, you might not even make the connections of who is who in the other books. Like that's how minimal it is. But basically, I don't understand how this book fits into it. So it is even better that this is the only book that fits into the It's Always Been You trope, because, you know, it's kind of very much a standalone. But anyway, that was enough rambling. This is basically a friends to enemies / strangers to lovers. Basically, it's about these two people that grew up with each other. They were the best of friends and they were on the hockey team together and they were inseparable. And then something happens to happen. Oh yeah, there's trigger warnings for assault in this book. So, I mean, spoilerish, but you know, trigger warnings. Anyway, something happens in this book and for whatever reason, this guy is going to move away when they're still kids. And he doesn't even like say goodbye to her. And she is really upset because, you know, her best friend just left her without saying goodbye. And they were actually like, you know, they were crushing on each other and she was very hurt. And basically now it's a couple of years later and this guy randomly shows up again and he's like, can we please talk? Like, I really want to like, you know, be friends again and stuff. And she's like, who the hell do you think you are? Like, you avoid me for years. You just leave without, you know, saying goodbye, all that stuff. I don't want to talk to you. And basically the story's kind of going to go from there. So you get to see, you know, both sides. Is it dual timeline? Yeah, it is a dual timeline. So you get to see like, you know, in the past, what happened when they were best friends. And then you get to see like present day, and happens to be this guy in the present day is now a pro hockey player. And she had quit playing hockey after he left. So there's a lot of stuff going on. I very much liked this book. I happen to love the entire series, but this is one of my favorites from the series, so I seriously couldn't recommend this book more. Anyway, that is all of the books that have the It's Always Been You trope in it, so I'm curious to know if you liked this video. Did you like seeing this trope, even though it is somewhat spoilery to tell you that like all of these books have the It's Always Been You trope in it? I'm curious, so leave me a comment down below. I'm also curious to know if you have any recommendations for me. Do you have a book that has the It's Always Been You trope in it that I didn't happen to recommend in this video? Let me know. But either way, if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. And either way, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, enjoy reading.